Hello, and welcome back to our weekly discussion of our mission in this world as mankind in general and as Jews in particular, as we learn out from the 5 books of Moses, the Torah. This week, we are learning from the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, in the portion, our parsha, called Shoftim. In this 5th section of the book of Devarim, we continue with Moses' farewell address to the Jewish people as he prepares himself to die and prepares the people themselves to enter the land of Canaan. Of note, Moses instructs the people to appoint judges, shoftim. He continues with instructions regarding other leaders of the Jewish people that will come to be in the land of Israel. What can we learn from this? So, as we start out in the very beginning of the parsha, it says here, Shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha. You should set up judges and police officers for yourself. So this is interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one is you might remember that after the flood, after the Mabul, Noah was given 7 laws. 7. We Jews have 613. He was given 7. What was one of them? To set up a justice system. So in some ways, this seems like a continuation or even an expansion of the original 7 laws. And as we've mentioned before, as we've suggested before, there were 3 different times that God has made a covenant with man. First was with Adam, which we know how that went. Then was with Noah after the flood, and finally with the Jewish people. And we discussed previously how we know that that's the final covenant. We won't go into it again here. But we see then that setting up a judgment, a system of justice, is part of the mission. Now, it's interesting because related to that, just 2 verses later, it says Tzedek Tzedek Tirdof. Very, very famous verse, very famous pasuk. Justice, justice, you shall pursue. What does this mean, and why in particular is the word justice repeated? And what does this have to do with setting up a judicial system? So the Rav, of course, comes to help us a little bit and says, as part of our mission to set up a world which is filled with peace and spirituality, we have to recognize that absolute peace and absolute judgment cannot coexist. Why? Because if we had absolute judgment, that would be sort of akin to a zero tolerance policy for everything. Every infraction would be meted out with the same judgment, regardless of whatever extenuating circumstances might exist. Rav explains that this is telling us not to do that we have to actually take this into consideration. The Ramban adds to that, saying that this repetition of the word justice has a couple of meanings for us. One is that the judges themselves must be of the absolute highest caliber of person. It also says, according to Ramban, that we are to walk in Hashem's ways, walk in God's ways. When we've talked about this before, it comes up multiple times. We have to walk in God's ways. We have to do things the way God would do them. We have to try to imitate God. And just as God has 13 different characteristics, one of them being absolute judgment, another one being compassion, we also have to balance those different attributes, and particularly in justice. So again, right, with the walking in his ways, as we've seen before, and of course we see it here again with the walking thing. And it says just a few verses later, V'lalechet badarav, you should walk in his ways, meaning Hashem's ways. V'yasafta lecha ot shalos arim, that you should set up an additional 3 cities. So what is this talking about? Some of you may know already that in the land of Israel, once it was completely set up, there were to be 3 cities of refuge on one side of the Jordan and 3 cities of refuge on the other side of the Jordan, the so-called Arim Miklot, the cities of refuge. Now, what are these cities about? These cities are for a particular situation where somebody has accidentally, God forbid, killed his fellow. And it has to be a certain situation. It was clearly an accident. It was clearly not somebody for whom he was harboring bad feelings the day before, the day before that. It was something happened, right? Now, according to Torah law, this unfortunate happening could be met with a very strict tachas ayin tachas, eye for an eye. The family would be in their right to now kill the person who had killed their family member. The Torah comes to say, hold on a second, we have to consider the extenuating circumstances. When he just head up these cities, this person is allowed to then go to that city. They have to live there for an extended period of time. They have to spend quite a bit of time examining themselves, maybe seeing if there was some fault of their own that caused this accident to happen, what was maybe missing in their own personal spiritual development that maybe caused this to happen. The next pasuk is actually very interesting, and it talks a lot about what we were just saying before. This land of Israel, this is your inheritance. This is your responsibility. And if something bad were to happen to this person who, through pure accident and maybe negligence, killed somebody, if his blood were to be shed, it's on your hands. So it goes back to what we were saying before. Tzedek, tzedek, we have to produce, we have to pursue the absolute justice in a tempered way that is mimicking the ways of Hashem, and this is very much part of our mission. So in summary, our mission could be seen in part as a continuation of that of Noah, but we need to establish a justice system that is mimicking what Hashem himself may do. We also learn that in doing this, absolute justice and absolute peace cannot coexist. Thus, we have to temper this all or nothing approach that by imitating Hashem himself. I hope you enjoyed the little discussion. Please like if you did. Please subscribe if you're so interested. Besoros Tovos to all of you, and a Shabbat Shalom.